At what was supposed to be a simple family discussion, my daughter-in-law slapped me across the face for refusing to fund her luxury birthday. My own son, Ethan, then threatened to take every penny from my account, even though I'd supported them for years in my own home. I simply smiled. They didn't know I'd been waiting for this moment. This is my story. Like, share, and let me know where you're listening from. The sting of Serena's hand across my face was sharp, immediate, but not surprising. My 63 years had taught me that betrayal often arrives not with a whisper, but a resounding slap. $50,000 for a birthday party, Serena? I had asked, my voice calm despite the tremor in my chest. That's an absurd amount. You know I can't justify that. My refusal was met not with understanding, but with a furious crimson blush spreading across her face, followed by the open palm of her hand. The sound echoed in the silent living room, a harsh punctuation mark to years of subtle disrespect. Then came the deeper wound, not to my cheek, but to my heart. My son, Ethan, my only child, stepped forward, not to defend me, but to stand beside his wife. "Mom, you're being unreasonable," he said, his voice laced with the same cold impatience I had grown accustomed to. "Serena deserves this. You're just being difficult. A burden, like always." Burden, the word hung in the air, heavier than the silence that followed. Serena, emboldened by Ethan's allegiance, shrieked, her voice shrill enough to shatter glass. "Pack your bags and get out of my house. You hear me? Get out!" My house. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. A familiar one. This was the house I had bought with my late husband, the house I had lived in for 40 years, the house they had moved into 5 years ago under the guise of helping me, only to slowly claim it as their own. Ethan, not to be outdone in cruelty, pushed his advantage. "And don't think you're taking anything with you, Mom. I'm going to take every cent from your account. You've been living off me long enough." The gall, the audacity, the sheer inversion of truth was breathtaking. Living off him? For 5 years I had quietly shouldered their burdens. Their mortgage, a loan I had taken out against my pension, had been paid by me. The sleek new car Serena drove, the one Ethan insisted was necessary for his career, bought with my savings. Their expensive vacations, their designer clothes, even their weekly grocery bills, all quietly funded by me, Clara the burden. I had watched my retirement fund dwindle, my peace of mind erode, all for the sake of my son and his grasping wife. But something shifted within me at that moment. The sting on my cheek, the crushing weight of their words, it didn't break me. Instead, a strange, almost serene calm washed over me. A genuine smile, slow and deliberate, stretched across my lips. It wasn't a smile of mirth, but one of profound understanding, of an intricate plan finally falling into place. Ethan and Serena faltered, their face a mixture of confusion and unease. The expected tears, the pleading, the apologies, they never came. My smile, unexpected and out of place, disarmed them completely. "I've been waiting for this day," I said, my voice steady, almost melodic. "I knew this moment would come, and I've been preparing for it." Without another word, I turned and walked toward the stairs. Each step was light, purposeful. I heard their hushed, anxious whispers beginning behind me, a low hum of worry replacing their earlier bluster. They were speculating, I knew, trying to decipher my unexpected reaction. They couldn't know, not yet, that their words had been a mere confirmation of what I had suspected for years, a final push into action. A memory surfaced, clear as crystal. It was a year ago, a Sunday afternoon. I had feigned sleep on the living room sofa, a thin blanket pulled to my chin, as Ethan and Serena debated my future over tea. "We can put her in that nice nursing home," Serena had cooed, her voice saccharine. "It's clean and she'll have company. Then we can finally sell the house and inherit what's left. It'll be perfect for the down payment on the new place." Ethan had only grunted in agreement, the sound a dull thud against my pretending heart. They thought me a helpless old woman, a relic to be moved aside, her assets plundered. That day, a seed of resolve had been planted deep within me. I wouldn't be helpless. I wouldn't be plundered. I would prove them wrong. Now, as I walked into my bedroom, the scent of lavender and old books, a familiar comfort, I felt a calm I hadn't known in years. My hands moved with meticulous precision as I opened my suitcases, not the large ones they usually saw, but smaller, older ones carefully stored. I packed only essentials, things that held true meaning, carefully folded clothes, a few cherished photographs, my late husband's watch. Each item was placed with a deliberate slowness, a silent act of reclaiming myself. A sense of strength flowed through me, a power born of long simmering resentment and quiet preparation. I was halfway through when a soft knock sounded at the door. Ethan, he pushed it open tentatively, his eyes darting around the room, landing on the open suitcases. His bravado had vanished, replaced by a strained attempt at gentleness. "Mom," he began, his voice surprisingly soft. "Look, Serena didn't mean what she said. She was just upset. And I didn't mean to imply I'd drain your account. You know I'd never do that." I paused, a small framed photo of my husband held delicately in my hand. I met his gaze, observing the flicker of fear, the calculation behind his worried eyes. He wasn't apologizing. He was testing the waters, trying to regain control. "Gain amount. You're worried," I stated, not a question, but a quiet observation. He started to protest, to spin another lie, but I cut him off. My voice was calm, final, a door closing on a chapter that had long needed to end. "Things ended between us a long time ago, Ethan. You just didn't notice." My words to Ethan yesterday weren't merely an emotional outburst. They were the culmination of 6 months of meticulous, silent preparation. The slap, the insults, the threats. They were simply the final notes in a symphony of betrayal I had long anticipated. The true catalyst hadn't been an argument, but a sound. Serena's brittle, manipulative laughter drifting from Ethan's study, followed by a hushed conversation that peeled back the polite veneer of their regard for me. It was shortly after that I found them, tucked carelessly beneath a stack of bills I was expected to pay. Glossy brochures for expensive nursing homes. Not just any homes, but ones with names like Sunset Manor and Golden Years Retirement Village, adorned with cheerful images of elderly residents playing chess or tending gardens. The accompanying financial summaries detailing astronomical costs and lengthy waiting lists confirmed my worst fears. They weren't just thinking of moving me out. They were planning to imprison me while systematically draining my resources. They truly believed I was a fool, weak and dependent, a frail old woman easily manipulated and trapped. My quiet nature, my enduring patience, my willingness to always give them the benefit of the doubt, they misinterpreted it all as senility, a failing mind incapable of understanding their elaborate schemes. They couldn't have been more wrong. The morning light now streamed through my bedroom window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, a stark contrast to the darkness that had settled around my heart. Each item I placed in my suitcase was more than just clothing or a memento. It was a tangible reminder of a sacrifice made, a dream deferred. My life, it occurred to me, had been a tapestry woven with threads of endless giving, particularly for Ethan. I was 28 when Arthur died, a sudden heart attack stealing him from me at 32. One moment he was my vibrant, loving husband, the next a gaping void. I was left a young widow, a 5-year-old Ethan clutching my hand, and a mountain of medical debt that threatened to swallow us whole. There was no time for prolonged grief, no luxury for despair. I had a son who needed me, so I became Clara, the nurse, not just a caregiver for others, but the sole provider for my own. For 30 years, the antiseptic scent of the hospital became my perfume, the fluorescent hum of its halls my lullaby. I worked double shifts, picked up extra weekends, often going without new clothes or holidays, all while meticulously saving every penny. My ambition wasn't for myself, but for Ethan. I wanted him to have the life Arthur and I had envisioned, a life free from the struggles that had defined mine. I poured every ounce of my being into his education, his future, believing that his success would be my ultimate reward. When he graduated from college, resplendent in his cap and gown, I swelled with a pride so immense it nearly burst my chest. He stood there, my brilliant boy, the culmination of all my hard work, my sleepless nights. I believed in my blind naivety that my mission was accomplished, that my sacrifices had paved the way for a beautiful, secure future for us both. Now, looking back, That pride felt like a fool's gold, shimmering deceptively in the dim light of my memories. The true awakening, the stark realization of their callousness, came 3 months ago. It was a Tuesday evening, a cool breeze carrying the scent of jasmine through the open window. I was sitting in the parlor, ostensibly reading, but my hearing, contrary to their assumptions, was still exceptionally sharp. Their voices, usually muted in my presence, were clear as church bells from Ethan's study, where they thought themselves safe behind a closed door. Serena's voice, laced with irritation, cut through the quiet. She's asking about the $800 grocery bill again. Ethan, she's going to notice eventually. Ethan scoffed, a dismissive sound. Just tell her it's all organic, Mom. She won't know the difference. She barely remembers what she had for breakfast. My stomach churned, not from hunger but from disgust. $800 for groceries. I knew for a fact they were spending half that, if even. The rest, I suspected, disappeared into Serena's luxury purchases, masked by their organic charade. Serena, however, was still fretful. But she asked to see the mortgage statements last week. I don't think she's as stupid as she looks. Then came Ethan's reply, delivered with a chilling calm that made my blood run cold. Don't worry, honey, we just need to hold out for another 6 months. Sunset Manor has an opening. I've already put her on the waiting list. Once she's in, I'll get the power of attorney squared away. If she puts up a fight, well, Dr. Peterson owes me a favor. A quick diagnosis of early onset dementia, and she'll be institutionalized before she knows what hit her. My blood literally froze in my veins. I wasn't their mother, their benefactor, or even a burden. I was a mark, a pawn in some elaborate con game, a ticking clock before my assets could be legally stripped from me, my life taken over, my freedom stolen. The image of the helpless old woman they had created was not just a convenient lie, it was a weapon. That night, lying in the darkness of my room, staring at the ceiling, I didn't cry, I didn't panic. A steely resolve settled deep within me. I would play their game. Oh yes, I would play their game, but I would play to win. The very next morning, before the sun had fully risen and before either Ethan or Serena had stirred from their luxurious slumber, my phone calls began. First to a lawyer, a man renowned for his sharp mind and discretion. Then to a real estate agent, one I had known and trusted for years. The plan, born of betrayal and nurtured by quiet determination, was already in motion. My plan was simple, yet devastatingly effective, built on a foundation of their profound complacency. They saw me as senile, forgetful, easily duped. They failed to grasp one crucial detail. Despite their repeated attempts to persuade me over the past 5 years, the house, this grand old structure they so desperately coveted, remained solely in my name. I had always found an excuse, a vague mention of complicated legalities, or waiting for the right tax year, to avoid adding Ethan to the deed. In truth, it was a subtle act of self-preservation, a tiny seed of defiance I had unknowingly planted years before their true intentions blossomed into full-blown avarice. Over the past 6 months, operating in absolute secrecy, I had quietly initiated the sale of my home. Not to a private buyer, which would have generated too much paperwork and potential inquiries, but to a discreet property investment company. They specialized in quick, no-fuss transactions, eager to acquire prime real estate without the typical bureaucratic delays. The process was swift, seamless, and entirely untraceable by Ethan or Serena. The money from the sale, a substantial sum that represented my entire life's work, was now safely tucked away in an account they couldn't touch, a fortress against their greed, a lifeline for my future. I imagined their faces when the truth finally dawned on them. The realization that there was no home to inherit, no mortgage to worry about because it was already paid off, no equity to cash out. Their grand plans, their schemes of selling my house for a down payment on the new place, would crumble into dust. The thought brought a grim satisfaction that settled deep within my bones. Every penny of my savings, the fruit of 30 years of nursing, the hard-earned money I had meticulously guarded, had also been transferred. My primary bank account, the one Ethan had so carelessly threatened to drain, now held a paltry sum, precisely $12.37. It was an amount so insignificant it was almost comical, a final mocking gesture from a woman they had underestimated beyond measure. As I finished packing, my hands instinctively gravitated towards items of true sentimental value. Arthur's simple gold wedding band, worn smooth by time and love. My mother's pearl earrings, delicate and luminous, a legacy passed down through generations. And finally, a small, tarnished silver locket containing a faded, sepia-toned picture of baby Ethan. He was perhaps 6 months old, gurgling with delight, his wide eyes shining with an unconditional love that mirrored my own. I stared at the image, tracing the innocent curve of his cheek with my thumb. I remembered rocking him to sleep in this very room, singing lullabies, feeling the warmth of his small body against mine. His chubby arms had reached out for me, his trusting gaze never leaving my face. There was a time when he was my world, and I undeniably was his. When did it change? When did I, his devoted mother, become the enemy? The transformation hadn't been abrupt, but a slow, insidious erosion, like water wearing away stone. I could trace its origins, its subtle beginnings, back to Serena's arrival in our lives. She was charming, sophisticated, with an air of effortless elegance that I, a plain-spoken nurse, could never hope to emulate. Her compliments were often backhanded, her concern laced with condescension. She made me feel like an embarrassment, a relic from a less refined past. "Oh, Clara, bless your heart, you still do things the old-fashioned way, don't you?" she'd say, a saccharine smile on her lips, her eyes betraying a hint of disdain. Gradually, imperceptibly, Ethan began to see me through Serena's filtered lens. My advice, once sought and cherished, became interference. My concerns for their well-being were dismissed as nagging. The dedicated mother who had sacrificed everything for him became the interfering old woman, and the tireless worker who had built this life for him, a mere burden. Their love had curdled into something cold and transactional, their affection predicated on my continued financial support. Now, as I latched my last suitcase, a profound sense of closure settled over me. I was ready to walk out of this house, this repository of both beautiful memories and crushing betrayals, for the very last time. I would leave behind the ghosts of past happiness, the echoes of laughter that no longer belonged here. But I would take with me something far more valuable, my dignity, my independence, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing I had outsmarted those who sought to exploit me. For the first time in 5 years, the heavy weight of their expectations lifted. A lightness filled me, a sense of limitless possibility. Soon I would be truly free. The morning I left was gray and drizzly, mirroring the somber mood I imagined would soon settle over Ethan and Serena. I loaded my 2 carefully packed suitcases into the trunk of my old, reliable Honda Civic, a car they often scoffed at for its age. It was a vehicle that had seen me through countless hospital shifts, a silent witness to a life of quiet sacrifice. Today it was carrying me toward a new unknown freedom. Neither Ethan nor Serena came downstairs to see me off. There was no pretense of a goodbye, no final plea for me to stay. But as I pulled out of the driveway, I caught a glimpse of Serena's face, pale and drawn, peeking through the elegant lace curtains of the living room window. Her expression was a mixture of bewilderment and budding alarm, a silent acknowledgement that something was irrevocably wrong. She just didn't know what yet. I took one last lingering look at the house. It had been my home for 35 years, the place where I had raised Ethan, where Arthur and I had built a life together. It held countless memories, both joyful and heartbreaking. But as I drove away, a profound weight lifted from my shoulders with each turn of the wheels. It wasn't sadness that filled me, but a burgeoning sense of liberation. The house was no longer a sanctuary, it had become a cage. My destination was Maple Street, a quiet, tree-lined thoroughfare far removed from the manicured lawns and pretentious facades of my former neighborhood. Here, in this modest corner of town, working people lived. The houses were smaller, older, radiating a comfortable, lived-in charm. It felt real, authentic, a stark contrast to the hollow grandeur I had just left behind. My new landlady, Mrs. Lee, was a spry 72-year-old widow with a kind smile and eyes that held a lifetime of stories. She welcomed me warmly to my new apartment, a cozy space on the second floor of a converted Victorian house. It was a charming building, with creaky floorboards and quirky angles, but it had character. Unlike my old home, which had been meticulously maintained for their comfort, this place embraced its age. The faint scent of old wood and brewing tea filled the air, a comforting aroma that spoke of home, not a sterile showpiece. The apartment itself was small but bright, filled with the soft morning light filtering through lace curtains. It was compact, efficient, and felt peaceful in a way I had forgotten was possible. The occasional groan of the old pipes or the gentle hum of Mrs. Lee's television downstairs felt like welcome quirks, not irritations. This was a place where I could simply be, free from judgment, free from the constant undercurrent of their demands. Part of my 6-month-long planning had involved securing this place. I had already paid 3 months' rent in advance, a testament to my financial foresight and independence. It was a small act, but it solidified my sense of security, ensuring I had a soft landing after years of providing one for others. I spent the next hour simply sitting, savoring the golden silence. There was no Serena complaining about a chipped nail or a forgotten errand. There was no Ethan on a loud, exasperated phone call, his latest business venture inevitably failing, requiring my financial intervention. The quiet was a balm to my weary soul, a precious gift I had yearned for far too long. Just as I finished unpacking my few belongings and made myself a cup of tea, my phone vibrated. Ethan. His name flashed on the screen, a stark reminder of the life I had just severed ties with. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and answered. "Mom, where are you?" His voice was strained, a tight coil of anxiety. The casual indifference from yesterday was gone, replaced by an unfamiliar edge of panic. "I'm in my new apartment, Ethan," I replied, my voice calm, almost placid. The quiet of my new home enveloped me, lending strength to my words. "I moved out this morning." A beat of stunned silence followed. I could practically hear his mind racing, trying to process this unexpected turn of events. Then a barely audible whisper, thick with disbelief. "You... what?" The calm broke, a volcanic eruption of anger spewed from the phone. "You can't do this, Mom. What do you mean you moved out? This is our home. You can't just leave." His voice rose, raw and furious, cracking with a mixture of outrage and fear. "It was my home, Ethan," I corrected him, my voice unwavering, "and it's no longer mine. I sold it 6 months ago. You and Serena will have to find somewhere else to live." I could almost feel his world collapsing, the comfortable illusion he had built around himself shattering. Another moment of shocked silence, then a fresh wave of indignation. "Sold it? Without telling us? That's illegal. You can't just sell our house." "It was never our house, Ethan," I stated, a touch of weariness creeping into my tone. "It was mine, and now it belongs to a property investment company. You'll have to deal with them." I could hear him sputtering, trying to formulate a coherent argument, a new threat, but I was done. "You'll figure it out, Ethan," I said, my finger already hovering over the end call button. "You always do. Goodbye." I hung up, cutting off his indignant protests, a decisive end to round one. The silence that followed was not just golden, it was triumphant. The story of my emancipation is far from over. There are more twists and turns ahead, moments of quiet triumph and resounding justice. If you're finding this journey as gripping as I did living it, please make sure to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to stay tuned for the next parts. Your support helps me share my truth. That evening, perched on the small balcony of my new apartment, a cup of chamomile tea warming my hands, I experienced a peace so profound it was almost breathtaking. The city hummed softly below, a gentle symphony of distant traffic and murmuring conversations. It wasn't the manicured silence of my old grand house. It was the vibrant, alive or quiet of a community. For the first time in years, my mind was truly still, free from the constant hum of worry, the insidious whispers of their demands. It was a real, deep, uninterrupted peace, a treasure I hadn't realized I'd been missing so desperately. The next morning, I woke with the sun, a lightness in my step. I walked down the street to a small, bustling cafe, ordering a simple breakfast of toast and coffee. Around me, people chatted, read newspapers, and went about their day, their lives interwoven in the fabric of the neighborhood. Being one of them, just an ordinary person enjoying an ordinary morning, felt extraordinary. It was a stark contrast to the performative existence I had endured in my own home, constantly navigating their moods and expectations. Back at my apartment, a blinking light on my answering machine indicated a new message. It was a crisp, professional male voice belonging to Daniel Hayes, an attorney. He stated he was representing Ethan and Serena in their inquiry regarding the recent property transaction. He requested I contact him immediately to discuss reversing the sale. A quiet smile touched my lips. Reversing the sale? The very idea was absurd. My secret arrangements had been meticulous, carefully orchestrated over 6 months with my own seasoned lawyer, Mr. Henderson, who specialized in elder law. He had ensured every T was crossed, every I dotted. The sale was legal, binding, and completely within my rights. There was no loophole for them to exploit, no legal maneuver to undo what was done. The significant profit from the sale of the house hadn't been spent frivolously. Instead, it was now safely ensconced in a carefully structured trust fund managed by an independent financial institution. This trust was designed to provide me with a comfortable, reliable monthly income for the rest of my life, ensuring my financial independence without needing to touch the principal. It was my safeguard, my future, built on the ruins of their greed. Crucially, the trust included a specific, unyielding clause. Any family member who challenged my mental competency or attempted to gain control of my assets would, upon being proven wrong and me found competent, be permanently excluded from any future inheritance. It was a legal iron curtain, a preemptive strike against their inevitable next move. They thought they could declare me unfit, lock me away, and claim my wealth. I had ensured that such an attempt would backfire spectacularly. Ethan and Serena were about to learn that I was far from helpless. Their education, I realized, was just beginning. Later that afternoon, my phone rang again. It was Eleanor Vance, a kind woman who had been my neighbor for 20 years. "Clara, dear, are you all right?" she began, her voice tinged with concern. "Ethan and Serena have been shouting at each other for 3 days straight, and they're loading boxes into their cars. What on earth is going on?" "I'm perfectly fine, Eleanor," I reassured her, my voice calm and steady. "The house was sold, you see. I moved out this morning into a lovely little apartment downtown." Eleanor gasped. "Sold? Without telling them?" Her voice shifted from concern to astonished admiration. "Oh, Clara, you sly fox. Good for you, dear." It was a small, unexpected moment of solidarity that warmed me. Not long after, another call. This time it was Serena. Her voice, usually dripping with sugary condescension or outright arrogance, was now devoid of both. It was strained, bordering on desperate, an attempt at sounding reasonable. "Clara, it's Serena. Look, I know we had a bit of a disagreement. I'm so sorry about the other day. I truly didn't mean to slap you. It was just a moment of stress." I listened, my expression neutral. Her apology was rehearsed, a veneer of contrition thinly masking her true emotions. I could practically hear the fear vibrating in her voice, the frantic realization that her carefully constructed world was crumbling. "It wasn't just one stupid fight, Serena," I interjected, cutting through her practiced words. "It was 5 years of taking me for granted, 5 years of bleeding me dry, of treating my home as your personal piggy bank." "But we gave you a place to live," she argued, a hint of her old self trying to resurface. "In my own house," I retorted, the words sharp and pointed, "where I was treated like hired help, not a mother, not a family member." She began to bluster, to cry, to offer a flurry of excuses and half-hearted apologies. "We can work this out, Clara. Please, let's talk. We can't just lose everything." Her pleas were laced with self-pity, her tears clearly for her own predicament, not for the pain she had inflicted. Never once did she acknowledge the depth of their betrayal, the years of emotional and financial abuse. Her apologies were transactional, a desperate attempt to regain what she believed she was entitled to. I heard enough. "Goodbye, Serena," I said, and calmly pressed the end call button. The line went dead, severing the last fragile thread between us. 3 days later, while picking up groceries from the local market, I bumped into Delia Santos, a former neighbor whose penchant for knowing everyone's business was legendary. Her eyes lit up when she saw me, a mix of genuine curiosity and barely contained excitement. Clara, there you are. I heard you moved. Is everything all right? She began, lowering her voice conspiratorially. Because, well, you know about Ethan and Serena. Everyone's talking. Chloe Evans said she saw them moving into that tiny one-bedroom in the Riverside district. Can you imagine after that big house? A quiet satisfaction settled in my chest. The Riverside district was a far cry from their previous lifestyle, a stark reality check for their extravagant tastes. Yes, Delia, everything is perfectly all right, I replied, maintaining a calm demeanor. I'm very happy in my new apartment. Delia leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper, and Jim Morrison from the hardware store. He told my husband that Ethan was in there actually asking about job openings. Looking for work, if you can believe it. She finished with a triumphant sniff, as if the very idea was preposterous for a man of Ethan's caliber. I simply smiled. Well, Delia, I said diplomatically, everyone should contribute to society. Wouldn't you agree? I left her to process that thought, a spring in my step. Later that afternoon, I called my oldest and dearest friend, Miriam Stone. We had known each other since childhood, and she was one of the few people who knew the true extent of Ethan and Serena's behavior. Miriam, I started. You won't believe what Delia just told me. Miriam didn't miss a beat. Good for you, Clara. It was about time you shook things up. I've been telling you for years they were taking advantage. Her immediate validation was a balm to my soul, a reminder that I wasn't alone in my perception. Oh, and speaking of those two, Miriam continued, Chloe Evans saw Serena at the pharmacy yesterday, filling out a job application. Can you imagine Serena working at the pharmacy? The woman who couldn't even make her own coffee unless it was from a high-end machine? We shared a laugh, a genuine, unburdened sound that felt wonderfully liberating. I had been receiving voicemails from Ethan almost daily since I'd hung up on him. Initially, they were filled with indignant anger, demands to know what I thought I was doing, threats of legal action. Then they shifted to pleading, tearful appeals for me to reconsider, to come back, to talk things through. Most recently, a new tone had crept in, a softer, almost mournful quality. He spoke of missing me, of remembering simpler times, of feeling lost without me. He misses my bank account, Miriam. I stated, my skepticism firmly in place. That's all this new longing is about. Miriam, ever the pragmatist, offered a different perspective. Maybe, Clara, or maybe sometimes it takes a harsh loss for people to clarify what truly matters. Perhaps he's finally seeing how much he truly depended on you, not just for money, but for stability, for love. I listened, not entirely convinced, but willing to consider the possibility. 3 months melted into 4, then 5, and my new life began to take shape. I discovered a simple, pure joy in small moments. The morning ritual of making my own coffee, the quiet hours spent reading in a sunbeam, the camaraderie with Mrs. Lee over shared stories. My days were no longer dictated by their whims, but by my own. One afternoon, I passed a community center advertising various classes. A small sign caught my eye, beginner watercolor painting. I had always harbored a secret desire to paint, a quiet, creative spark that had been long suppressed by the demands of work and family. I signed up that very day. The class was a revelation. Hannah, the instructor, was a warm, encouraging woman with a bright smile. She moved among her students, offering gentle guidance, never criticism. To my surprise, Hannah praised my first timid attempts. Clara, you have a natural eye for color, she'd said, holding up one of my landscapes. Don't be afraid to let it shine. In that class, I found not just a new hobby, but a new community. There was Evelyn, a retired school teacher with a mischievous twinkle in her eye, George, a quiet gentleman who painted intricate bird scenes, and Sophia, a vibrant woman who was always bursting with enthusiasm. We were a motley crew, united by our shared love of art and a growing friendship. We chatted, laughed, and critiqued each other's work with genuine warmth. It was a community of equals, something I hadn't realized I was so starved for. One sunny afternoon, as we packed up our brushes, Sophia clapped her hands together. All right, everyone, I have an idea. The weather's perfect next weekend. How about we all take a trip to seaside heights. We can paint seascapes. Imagine the ocean, the sky, the boardwalk. It'll be magnificent." A collective cheer went up. A beach trip. It felt wonderfully spontaneous, exhilarating. The following Saturday, we found ourselves on the sandy shores of Seaside Heights, easels set up, the salty breeze carrying the scent of the ocean. I dipped my brush into a vibrant blue, capturing the endless expanse of the sky. As Evelyn finished a stroke on her own canvas, she turned to me, her eyes twinkling. "Clara," she said, gesturing to the wide-open sea, the boundless horizon. "This is what freedom looks like, isn't it?" I paused, looking out at the shimmering waves, the gulls soaring overhead. A profound sense of understanding washed over me. "Yes, Evelyn," I thought, a tear pricking at the corner of my eye. "This truly is what freedom looks like." The ocean breeze carried the scent of salt and freedom as we painted our seascapes at Seaside Heights. The gentle lapping of waves against the shore was a soothing rhythm, a stark contrast to the tumultuous melody of my past life. It was here, amidst the laughter and camaraderie of my new friends, that a letter arrived, forwarded by Mrs. Lee. The handwriting on the envelope was unmistakably Ethan's, no longer the crisp, formal script of a lawyer's notice, but a hurried, almost shaky scrawl. My heart gave a small, involuntary flutter, a mix of apprehension and a reluctant curiosity. I opened it later, away from the watchful eyes of my friends, sitting on the small, comfortable sofa in my apartment. The words within were raw, unvarnished, a stark departure from his previous angry or desperate voicemails. He began by acknowledging his shame, a word I hadn't heard from him in years. He wrote of the man he had become, a man he barely recognized, and how appalled he was by the way he and Serena had treated me. The words resonated with a sincerity I hadn't felt from him since he was a boy. Then came the news. Serena had left him. She'd packed her bags and moved back to California, unable, he wrote, to cope with their new reality without my financial support. "She couldn't handle having to work for things, Mom," he confessed in the letter. "She blamed everyone, you, me, the world, for all her problems, never herself." It was a familiar pattern, one I had observed in Serena for years, a self-centeredness that prevented any genuine growth. It seemed her departure, while painful for Ethan, was a necessary step towards his own reckoning. He then detailed his own efforts to rebuild his life. He was working at Henderson Construction, a local firm, starting as a general laborer. The name brought a pang of nostalgia. It was where he'd worked during his high school summers, hauling lumber, learning the value of honest labor. I remembered the immense pride I'd felt when he brought home his first paycheck, his hands rough, but his smile bright. It was a memory I hadn't allowed myself to revisit in a long time. Living alone in a small apartment, cooking his own meals, doing his own laundry, he wrote, had forced him to remember. He spoke of my double shifts to pay for his college tuition, the countless hours I spent at school plays and sports events, how I always made his birthdays feel special, even when money was tight. He recalled specific instances, vivid details that tore at my heart. He remembered the bicycle. He was 12 and desperately wanted a brand new mountain bike, the kind all his friends had. I had worked extra shifts, he wrote, picked up every available hour, all to afford it. He remembered unwrapping it on Christmas morning, his sheer delight, and my beaming smile. What he also remembered now with aching clarity was that I hadn't bought myself a new winter coat that year, choosing instead to mend the old one, and telling him it was perfectly fine. He confessed with profound regret that he had never thanked me for that coat, or, he added, for a lot of things. He wasn't writing, he emphasized, to ask for forgiveness or, God forbid, for financial help. He simply wanted me to know that he understood. He understood what he had lost. "I'd lost my mother," he wrote, the words stark on the page. "The woman who sacrificed everything for me, who loved me unconditionally until I made that love impossible to give." He wished me happiness, hoped I was painting, traveling, doing all the things I had put off for so long, for him. I folded the letter carefully, a mix of emotions swirling within me. When I showed it to George during our next watercolor class, he read it slowly, his expression thoughtful. Well, Claire, he said, handing it back, my old man used to say, sometimes a person doesn't truly change until they lose everything they thought they had. Sounds like Ethan's had a pretty rude awakening. But is he learning the right lesson? I mused aloud. Is he acknowledging his own misfortune, or simply blaming circumstances, or even Serena, for his downfall? George nodded, understanding my skepticism. That's the trick, isn't it? Real change comes from within, from understanding your own part in it all, not just being a victim of someone else's choices. His words resonated deeply. Forgiveness. It was a word that had been far from my thoughts for so long. Arthur, Baker Armstrong. Arthur, my late husband, had always been a man of great compassion, often saying that holding on to anger only poisoned one's own heart. He would have wanted me to find peace, to forgive, not for their sakes, but for my own. But was Ethan truly deserving of it? And more importantly, what did I want? For the first time in my life, after decades of living for others, for my husband, for my son, the question was simply, profoundly about me. Returning home from the beach, the scent of salt still clinging to my clothes, I found myself anticipating things I hadn't dreamed of in years. I looked forward to another letter from Ethan, wondering what new realizations his words might reveal. Evelyn had extended an invitation for Thanksgiving dinner with her boisterous, loving family, and Sophia was already planning a Christmas trip to New England to paint snow-laden landscapes. My small apartment, once merely a place to live, had transformed into a personal haven, filled with my nascent paintings, cherished books, in a profound, peaceful silence. It was a space where I could simply be, truly myself. Still, a lingering doubt gnawed at me. Was Ethan's transformation genuine? Or was this merely another sophisticated manipulation, a new strategy to worm his way back into my good graces, and perhaps my finances? It was a question I couldn't answer from a distance. 1 year to the day since I had packed my 2 suitcases and driven away from my old life, a gentle knock sounded at my apartment door. My heart gave a surprised lurch. I peered through the peephole. It was Ethan. He stood there holding a small, unassuming bouquet of daisies, his expression tentative. He looked different, thinner perhaps, but healthier, his face no longer bloated with easy living and suppressed resentment. He wore simple, modest clothes, and there was a subtle weathering to his hands and face that spoke of honest, physical work, a stark contrast to the pampered, entitled son I had known. I opened the door but kept the chain latch engaged, creating a narrow gap between us. Ethan, I said, my voice calmer than the sudden rush of emotions I felt. Mom, he replied, his voice soft, almost hesitant. I brought these for you. Dandelions. Well, daisies, but they reminded me of the dandelions I used to pick for you every Saturday when I was little. Do you remember? A faint, tender memory flickered to life. Little Ethan, grubby-kneed, holding out a wilted bunch of yellow weeds, his eyes shining with adoration. It was a time before the bitterness, before Serena, before the weight of expectation. A genuine smile touched my lips, small but real. I unlatched the chain, opening the door wider. Come in, I said, stepping aside. But I'm not making coffee. You get water or nothing. It was a small assertion of control, a reminder of the new dynamic. He stepped inside, his eyes sweeping around the cozy space, lingering on my paintings. Your apartment is lovely, Mom, he said, sounding genuinely impressed. He sat on the edge of the armchair, the daisies carefully placed on the small coffee table. Then he began. His apology wasn't flowery or rehearsed. It was raw, heartfelt. He acknowledged everything, their actions, his role in them, how he had allowed Serena's influence to warp his judgment and change him into a person he was ashamed of. He didn't make excuses. He owned it. It was easier, Mom, he confessed, his voice thick with emotion, to believe that you were the problem, that you were just difficult or a burden. It was easier than confronting my own selfishness, my own entitlement, my own desire for your money without earning it. He spoke of the emptiness he'd felt, even when he had everything, and the even greater emptiness when it was all gone. I saw real shame in his face, not just regret for the consequences, but true remorse for the pain he had inflicted. He looked at me, his eyes pleading, no longer for money, but for something far more precious. I don't expect you to forgive me, Mom. Not now, maybe not ever, but I want you to know I'm trying. I'm trying to earn the right to be your son again, someday. I studied him, searching for any hint of the old manipulation. There was none, only a tired honesty. I'm willing to try, Ethan, I finally said, my voice measured. We can have lunch once a month at Romano's. We'll split the check. And if you ever mention money or try to manipulate me or bring Serena into the conversation, these lunches will end. Do you understand? Relief flooded his face, transforming his features. Yes, Mom, I understand. I promise I won't let you down again. I looked at him, my expression firm. You already did, Ethan, many times. The question is whether you've learned enough to avoid doing it again. He nodded, silent, understanding. He knew the road ahead was long, fraught with his own past mistakes. But for the first time in years, there was a glimmer of hope in his eyes, a fragile beginning. Later, I recounted the meeting to Evelyn over tea. She listened patiently, then smiled, a knowing warmth in her gaze. Clara, she said, and you're not making this decision from a place of need anymore. You're making it from a place of strength. You're not desperate for his love or his presence. You're choosing it on your own terms. Her words resonated deeply. She was right. I wasn't obligated. I wasn't afraid. For the first time, I was truly free to choose, not out of duty or fear, but from a place of quiet confidence, charting my own course toward a future I had finally claimed as my own.